Hello, welcome. My name is Alden Reed, and you're watching Arcane Tablets. Thank you for joining me. We're here late at night. Not quite 11, a little bit earlier tonight. July 4th. Happy birthday, America. So, I want to talk briefly about how storytellers are basically oracles, okay? So, I'm going to be giving out more and more information in the future about the universe, about reality, right? About all sorts of stuff that has happened in the past, all sorts of stuff that's happening now, all sorts of potential timelines and realities manifesting in the future, right? All sorts of details about the deep metaphysical secrets, right? Going on under the surface. And where I get a lot of this information from is actually from our stories from fictional sources, okay? Now, most storytellers, most modern storytellers, don't necessarily consciously sit down and think to themselves, I'm an oracle and I'm here to dish out the truth, right? They're just being creative. They're just being artistic. They're just letting it flow, of course. And all of their stories are absolutely stories in their own right, okay? And when I say that these stories serve as codes for reality, it's not necessarily a literal one for one thing, right? So the stories have a lot of stuff going on, and really you just need to kind of pick out pieces, right? You need to look at these main themes that keep happening, especially over and over. Especially by comparing a lot of different stories, you can see certain themes, certain characters, right? There's all sorts of fictional characters that serve as avatars for real characters, right? Real beings that have existed or do exist in reality. And so oftentimes when I'm talking about a lot of these beings, a lot of these historical characters, where I get a lot of the information that I have about them is from all the fiction that I've watched and read and consumed. Whether it's books or movies or TV shows, right? There's so much stuff going on. Because it can be a little bit difficult to get a lot of this extra information. Obviously, you can't really rely on conventional sources. The general conventional consensus still holds that so many of these things are not even true. Even though, of course, we're seeing more and more how lots of things are true that people did not think were true even 10 or 20 years ago. Government, the US government and other governments have pretty much screaming, trying to tell you that extraterrestrials are real and are indeed directly interacting with this world. It's just almost mind-boggling that there's not more general public awareness about it, right? But I think people have been so conditioned to have this hardcore material mindset that it's hard for them to open their minds, even to sort of scientific things, right? Material things like extraterrestrials. Although certainly, again, extraterrestrials often have an extra dimensional component to them, so it's very complicated. And all of this stuff is very woven into all sorts of other metaphysical and spiritual phenomenon going on, right? Everything is just all together. Fantasy and science fiction, aliens and fantasy creatures, all sorts of stuff, right? It's all real, okay? Now, again, the stories aren't going to be literally one for one, but you're going to see more and more how these certain avatars and characters show up over and over. And if you want to piece together the puzzle, if you want to figure out all the extra pieces and understand what's happened in the past, what's happening now, and what might come to pass in the future, then you need to take our storyteller oracles seriously. You need to start learning how to read the codes, right? And of course, I want you to understand that I'm not at all saying that conventional information is all lies or anything like that. Not at all. I'm very conventionally, intellectually, academically trained person, okay? And a master's in political science, which I do still plan to use in the work that I'm bringing out. But sort of bringing it all together, right? The conventional and the metaphysical knowledge, right? That's really what I'm here to do. I spent the first 32 years of my life pretty much being almost entirely focused on conventional material knowledge. And then, shortly before my 33rd birthday, I had a spiritual awakening and started to learn about all of these metaphysical things as well. And now I'm sort of weaving it all together. But by studying our storyteller oracles and all of the fiction, the fantasy and the science fiction and everything else that they've written, we can start to piece together the puzzle, like I said, right? Again, it's not so much that conventional reality is filled with lies. Certainly there is some information, some conventional information, which is not true. Even some very substantial pieces of conventional information that people believe in, which is not true. Nevertheless, I would say that probably the majority of conventional information out there is more or less true. It's more just that it's very incomplete. There's all of these other metaphysical, supernatural details pertaining to all sorts of fantasy or extraterrestrial beings, basically, which has basically been left out or cut out, right? And so in order to complete the picture, in order to really see what's going on, we need to also study these stories. And of course, I think people kind of know this intuitively. They sense this, right? There's lots of big stories out there, right? Obviously, we all know Star Wars, very much, and Lord of the Rings. Those are two big ones, especially for sort of space and fantasy, right? But there's many others as well. And usually it does work out that the more popular, the more well-known certain stories are, or certain movies or TV shows, right? The more powerful the oracular knowledge is, right? And by comparing many of these stories, and again, seeing that these same avatars show up over and over again, representing these real characters in reality, and the same themes, we can really piece together what has happened, right? It's so hard, right? There's so many people in the metaphysical and spiritual community trying to figure out what's going on. People generally know that all sorts of things are real, all sorts of supernatural phenomena, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, right? But there's so many different ideas out there. And when you go to try and read information from someone who's just trying to reconstruct all of this stuff in a purely conventional mindset, there's something a little bit lacking often, right? I mean, you can read hundreds of different books about Atlantis, say, with all sorts of different ideas and details about what Atlantis was. Of course, some people believe maybe that there were many different timelines sort of blending together. Perhaps people are remembering knowledge, right, from different timelines or something like that. That might be. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But irrespective, whatever the truth is, whether or not we think about history as sort of a unified central timeline or many possible timelines, if we want to understand some of this stuff and weave it together with all the conventional knowledge we have, weave it together with our understanding of reality right now, then we do need to look at all these storyteller oracles and learn about all the characters and the things that they're writing about or making TV shows or movies about. And that's how we're going to figure out what's happening, right? This is so much similar to the process of being talked to by the universe via signs, symbols, and synchronicities, right? I made a couple videos on this. I'll probably make some more videos, right? But truly, the universe, God, spirit, divine intelligence, is always talking to us. Well, those of us who are listening, at least. Anything in reality can potentially be a sign or a symbol. And it can be especially powerful when they start to work synchronistically, right? Synchronistically with things you're experiencing or thinking about in your mind, things that you're learning about, right? And so that's another big thing, right? You might be trying to learn about all of these details, try to understand Atlantis or understand all these fantasy beings or these extraterrestrials, extra-dimensionals, all of this stuff. But pay attention to all these stories, right? Because the universe is dishing out all sorts of awesome information. It can take a little bit of time to start to familiarize yourself with these things. It's very clear to me. I've been sort of working on this for a long time, and I think other people kind of see these themes as well. But certainly I also think you can learn I don't think that the universe is only speaking to me by any means. I think there are many people out there who definitely are listening, and many people who the universe is talking to, right? But take these storyteller oracles seriously. They've really told us about so much of what's happening. And when we weave it together with all this conventional information, right? Bringing together the conventional and the metaphysics, right? That's when things really start to sparkle. That's when we really start to see all the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. When the picture starts to come into a much clearer focus, right? So I'm going to be talking a lot more about all sorts of characters that have existed or that do exist currently right now in the universe, and all sorts of things that have happened on this world and many others. And you're going to notice that I frequently will reference fictional characters, stories, right? Things that happen in stories when I'm trying to tell you what has happened in the past, what is happening right now, and what might happen in the future. Right? This is kind of a way in which God is helping us out. Because people have become so dense and material and have also sort of forgotten all of the possibilities, forgotten so much of what has happened, so much of what is possible, right? There's a great Chinese proverb that I love. There are things which cannot be imagined, but nothing which is impossible. It doesn't mean that everything is true. I'm not saying that, okay? Like I said, you've got to read the codes, right? It's not a one-for-one. And all of these stories are absolutely stories in their own right. Like I said, most of these people, almost all of these creators, definitely were not sitting down thinking, I'm going to channel information from the universe, okay? They just go. They just flow. They're just artists. But Spirit is speaking through them, right? And especially when it comes to a lot of metaphysical information, that's kind of a thing I guess I should also add, right? So when it comes to conventional knowledge, right, that tends to be a lot more true. At least as far as the conventional knowledge of the past 6,000 years or so, right? Okay? The farther back you go, then, yeah, there's a lot of misinformation, right? About what did or did not happen. But in terms of modern times, where there's a lot of disinformation or misinformation, right, is actually in sort of the metaphysical community, right? Again, there's all these different ideas about what Atlantis was, or about all these different extraterrestrials and what they're doing. Are they working with the government? Are they this? Are they that? You can find so many different ideas out there. And many of them are ideas that are being created by people that are genuinely trying to figure out the truth and are genuinely trying to bring forth information. But I assure you, certainly since the New Age movement began in the late 19th century, there's all sorts of shenanigans up in that business, right? And there's a great deal of metaphysical information that has been tampered with, to say the least, if not outright fabricated, right? And so in order to really piece all the pieces together, we need to look to our storyteller oracles, because they're going to be delivering a lot of the true information about all sorts of characters and things that have happened, right? Wonderful world, right? So I want to thank you very much for watching this video. I want you to know that I love you very much, and that God loves you very much. I want you to know that you're wonderful and beautiful and absolutely perfect just the way you are. Many blessings. We'll see you again soon, especially as we dive more deeply into the details of all these stories. Oh, come on. You always knew. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all this stuff. Might not be one for one, but oh boy, there's plenty of true information in there. And if we want to find The good timelines find a path forward. Better start paying attention and taking it seriously. Which is exactly what I'm doing. Why I'm finally out here making this video, right? Many blessings. Much love. We'll see you soon.